A Supreme Court decision in Washington, D.C. may seem distant, almost like something that only matters to politicians and lawyers in the nation's capital. But the reality is, its impact will soon be felt directly in your wallet, affecting your everyday spending and the prices you see at the store. The court's recent ruling striking down key Trump-era tariffs will have a ripple effect on the price of cars, appliances, and even the materials used to build or renovate your home. These are things that touch nearly every American family. This isn't just a legal story, it's about your household budget, your monthly bills, and the choices you make to keep your finances on track. The court has fundamentally changed how America handles trade policy, shifting the balance of power and setting a new precedent for future decisions. Tariffs, which are taxes on imported goods, were used by the previous administration to protect American industries from foreign competition and to encourage buying American-made products. But these costs didn't just stay with businesses, they were passed down to you, the consumer, in the form of higher prices for everyday goods and services. The debate over whether tariffs help or hurt American families and businesses has been fierce, with strong arguments on both sides and passionate voices in the media and on the streets. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled not on the economics but on the legality of how these tariffs were imposed, focusing on the process rather than the outcome. This decision is a major check on presidential power in trade, reminding everyone that even the highest office must follow the rules set by the Constitution. For decades, Congress let the executive branch handle much of trade policy, often stepping back from direct involvement and oversight. The court's ruling re-examines who should really control trade. Should it be the president acting alone? Or should Congress have a bigger say in shaping the nation's economic future? The effects of this decision will unfold gradually, changing the landscape over months and even years as new policies are debated and implemented. Businesses that adjusted to tariffs will now need to readjust. Some may lower prices to attract customers, others may invest in growth or innovation to stay competitive in a changing market. Industries once protected by tariffs will face new competition, forcing tough choices for workers and communities that depend on those jobs. Some may thrive, while others may struggle to adapt. The economic landscape is shifting, and understanding these changes is crucial for everyone, from business owners to workers to families trying to make ends meet. What happens in Washington is about to hit home, shaping the way we live, work, and spend for years to come. To understand the Supreme Court's decision, we need to revisit why the tariffs were enacted. Starting in 2018, the Trump administration imposed tariffs, mainly targeting China but also affecting allies. The main argument addressed the trade deficit with China and counter unfair trade practices. Tariffs were also justified as protecting national security, using a Cold War-era law to shield steel and aluminum industries. The administration claimed a strong domestic steel industry was vital for defense. Another reason punished China for intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. The hope was to pressure China into fairer practices and protect American innovation. Politically, tariffs were meant to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. and appeal to voters hurt by globalization. The tariffs were a bold experiment to rewrite global trade rules, but the costs and benefits have been hotly debated ever since. The Supreme Court's decision wasn't about whether tariffs are good policy, but about who has the power to impose them. The case centered on the non-delegation doctrine. Congress can't hand over its lawmaking powers to the president. The court found that the law used to justify the tariffs gave the president too much unchecked authority. The phrase national security was stretched too far, covering everyday goods from allies. The ruling overturned tariffs on steel and aluminum from most countries but left tariffs on China in place. The distinction, tariffs on China, were based on different legal grounds. Dissenting justices warned against judicial overreach, but the majority reasserted Congress's authority over trade. Future tariffs will now require clearer, more specific authorization from Congress. The balance of power in trade policy has shifted. The economic impact of the tariffs has been clear. American importers and consumers ultimately paid the price, as the costs of tariffs were passed down the supply chain. Everyday Americans felt the effects at the checkout counter, with higher prices on a wide range of goods, from electronics to clothing. Studies show tariffs cost U.S. companies and consumers over $50 billion a year, draining resources from businesses and shrinking household budgets. This massive sum reflects not just direct payments but also the ripple effects throughout the economy. Prices for goods like washing machines and steel products rose sharply, reducing household purchasing power and making it harder for families to afford basic appliances. Manufacturers facing higher input costs often had no choice but to pass those costs on to consumers. Retaliatory tariffs from China and other countries hit U.S. exports hard, especially in the agricultural sector. American farmers who relied on foreign markets suddenly found themselves shut out or facing steep new barriers. U.S. soybean exports to China plummeted, leaving millions of bushels unsold. Government aid programs were introduced, but they couldn't fully offset the deep losses or the uncertainty farmers faced. While steel and aluminum jobs saw a brief boost, job losses in other sectors like manufacturing and agriculture far outweighed the gains, leading to a net loss for the American workforce. Higher input costs hurt automakers and manufacturers, leading to layoffs, plant closures, and slower economic growth in regions dependent on these industries. Globally, the trade war disrupted supply chains, delayed shipments, and slowed trade growth, making it harder for companies to plan and invest. Many companies responded by moving production to Southeast Asia, seeking lower costs and fewer trade barriers, not back to the U.S. as intended. The result was a more fragmented, less efficient global trading system, with companies scrambling to adapt to new rules and higher costs. The tariffs failed to bring manufacturing back to America in a meaningful way, leaving many factories shuttered and workers displaced. Instead, they raised costs for businesses and consumers worldwide, squeezing small businesses and making everyday life more expensive for families everywhere. The trade war's legacy is higher prices, lost jobs, and global uncertainty, with many communities still struggling to recover from the economic shock. The data is clear. The costs were widespread, touching nearly every sector, while the benefits were narrow and short-lived. The world is still dealing with the fallout, as leaders and economists debate how to rebuild a more stable and resilient global economy. The end of Section 232 tariffs creates new winners and losers in the U.S. economy. Industries relying on imported steel and aluminum, like automakers and construction, will benefit from lower costs. These savings could mean cheaper products and more jobs. Domestic steel and aluminum producers, once protected, now face tougher competition and may need to adapt quickly. Workers in these industries face uncertainty as companies adjust. Farmers could benefit indirectly as trade tensions ease and export markets reopen. The removal of tariffs on allies may lead to the end of retaliatory measures against U.S. farm products. Small businesses, from construction firms to craft breweries, will see lower input costs and new opportunities. The ripple effects will be felt throughout the supply chain. For some, it's a chance to grow. For others, a challenge to survive. The economic map is being redrawn. Every sector will need to adapt to the new reality. America's allies have welcomed the Supreme Court's decision. The European Union, Canada, and Mexico see it as a victory for fair trade and a chance to repair strained relationships. European industries, especially automakers, expect a boost from the removal of tariffs. Canada and Mexico can now export steel and aluminum tariff-free, strengthening North American supply chains. The ruling removes a major irritant in U.S. relations with its closest partners. In Southeast Asia, countries that benefited from the trade war now face uncertainty as global supply chains shift again. The world is watching to see if this signals a return to cooperation or just a pause in trade tensions. The decision is reshaping alliances and competition worldwide. The global trading system is entering a new phase. China's response to the Supreme Court ruling has been measured and cautious, reflecting both uncertainty and a desire to avoid escalating tensions. While the decision doesn't immediately lift tariffs on Chinese goods, it's widely seen as a symbolic blow to the era of unilateral U.S. trade actions, raising questions about the future of such policies. Chinese media have quickly framed the ruling as proof that the trade war was built on shaky legal ground, using it to bolster domestic confidence and question the legitimacy of past U.S. measures. For now, tariffs on Chinese goods remain firmly in place, continuing to exert pressure on China's vast export economy and challenging its manufacturers to adapt. The ruling could open the door for renewed negotiations between the two superpowers, but China's ambitious push for self-sufficiency in technology and innovation will continue regardless of external pressures. The trade war has already accelerated China's efforts to reduce reliance on U.S. technology, spurring investment in domestic research and development, and encouraging homegrown tech champions. The U.S.-China relationship is now defined by strategic competition, not just trade disputes, as both nations vie for global influence and technological leadership. The era of China as a low-cost manufacturing hub is over, replaced by a new focus on high-tech industries, advanced manufacturing, and innovation-driven growth. The US may now focus on building stronger alliances with other nations to address the China challenge, seeking a united front on trade, technology, and security issues. For Beijing, the question is whether this moment signals a genuine new era of cooperation, or if it's simply a temporary shift in a long-running rivalry that will continue to shape global affairs. One thing is clear, the rivalry between the US and China is far from over, and the next moves will be watched by the world. With tariffs gone, the US must rebuild trust with its allies. The path forward requires more than removing barriers, it demands active diplomacy and shared rules. Congress now has a chance to reclaim its authority over trade, setting clearer guidelines for the future. This could mean a slower, more deliberate approach to trade agreements, but one with broader support. Businesses must reevaluate their supply chains, balancing cost, resilience, and risk. Friendshoring, sourcing from allies, will likely continue. The goal, a stable, predictable global trading system that supports jobs and investment. The world has changed, and trade policy must adapt. Cooperation, not confrontation, is the way forward. Rebuilding trust will take time, but it's essential for prosperity. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point for American trade policy. Congress has reclaimed its role, and key industries are seeing relief. The ruling closes one chapter of the trade wars, but others remain open, especially with China. The world isn't returning to pre-2018 globalization, but moving toward more cautious, resilient trade. Friendshoring and alliances are now central to US strategy. For consumers, lower prices are likely. For some workers, renewed competition is a challenge. Diplomats have a chance to rebuild alliances and set new trade rules. The big question, should trade policy focus only on efficiency, or also on labor, the environment, and security? The old consensus is gone. A new one is yet to be built. The choices made now will shape global prosperity for decades to come.